schools, middle schools, high schools. It was a lot of fun, and I got to make friends with a lot of students and got to see sort of up close and personal what their experiences were like. So, wrong thing. All right. So typically in classroom, I have some mix with anime and real life shots, but oftentimes classrooms really do look this way, as you can see. There's a little bit of a background. The education system is split up like this. You go to about what is our 6th grade for elementary school or primary school, and then about 7th to 9th for us would be their middle school, and then 10th to 12th is their high school. Compulsory education is only until middle school. Technically, you don't have to go to high school. That was pretty standard, actually. Some people did go to high school, and then they'd get a job right after high school. But now almost everybody tries to go to college, and they're trying to raise the acceptance rate for students who graduate from high school to go to college. But we will start down here. Kindergarten students. Kindergarten is not compulsory, so students don't have to go, but nowadays many do so that they can get into the school that they want to later. Elementary school students. Elementary school students are where I'll go next. Of course, we see this all over in anime and media and manga. But so a class typically has about 30 plus students. There's less than 1% private schools in Japan for elementary schools because they're just sort of starting out, so everybody's on mostly even footing, so to speak. Most of them don't wear uniforms. More schools are trying to get uniforms, and uniforms are super common in middle school and high school, but not so much elementary. They typically wear the civilian clothing. But as I said, more schools are getting uniforms. Most of the private schools obviously have uniforms. Some of the public schools are getting them, more are getting them, and they look really different. Sort of depends on what look they're going for. The hats are actually really necessary, as are the backpack flaps. These are for traffic safety because elementary school students are really pretty much independent, and they're expected to be that way. So they'll go together in groups to school, and their parents won't take them to school. There are no school buses, anything like that. So they'll take the trains by themselves and whatnot. Again, no uniforms. So in here, you'll notice something, which are the backpack types. You can see them all here. These are rondoseru. Rondoseru are, they're based off of a Dutch military backpack, and they're what's commonplace for elementary school students. And what's really cool about them is that they're super expensive. They're probably about $500, $600. They're supposed to last your entire school career in elementary school. And usually somebody in the family gifts it to the student, like grandparents typically or something like that. But they're really nice. We had one I used to use for demonstrations in education, and they're really sturdy. They're really tough leather. They're really nice. They're well maintained. They're going to last a long time unless you throw it off a cliff or something. So all around the Seder. What's really common is typically black for boys, red for girls. Obviously, they have more colors now and different designs. There aren't really printed backpacks like we have or we'll see, not with like series or whatnot, but they'll have little designs, maybe like hearts, stars. Maybe sometimes you'll see Doraemon, which is the blue robotic cat. You won't see him in color, but you'll see like an outline in Stitch. They keep it very simple to keep a clean look. So school lunches are really exciting, and they're also very different from grade level to grade level. In elementary school, you don't bring your lunch typically. You have sort of communal lunch. So you bring all the food and stuff from a kitchen in the school to your classroom, and you as a student will be on duty, and with maybe a few other students. You'll bring that food to the classroom, and then they'll wear the hairnets and whatnot and the little coats to keep things sanitary, and they will serve their fellow students these lunches. You can see one here. So they keep it pretty balanced. There have been articles in recent years about how school lunches aren't balanced anymore, and so you'll see some teachers try and record this, and they'll show like they don't have bread or pizza or anything, but they'll be really bland, maybe like some lettuce and fish and rice, and that's it. And so people have been complaining recently, especially parents, about students needing to have proper nutrition and whatnot. So it's a big controversial subject right now. Middle school students always wear uniforms. Typically you'll see the sailor uniform. The boys' uniform was based off of, which usually has the high neck collar, which you'll see on some of them, not the white shirts, but the dark ones. Those are based off of Prussian military uniforms. And then the sailor outfits actually were, they came about in the early 1900s for women who were going to go to school, as opposed to more of the preparatory schools for girls that used to exist, which would show you how to do math and finances for the house, cooking, sewing, and then they expanded on that and wanted more women to be educated. And thus that was the uniform that came about for them. And again, you'll see that, but not him. That's different, but those kind of uniforms. Oops, there we go. So in the class, you'll see about average 30 to 40 students in a class. The homeroom teacher, I see some people have an academic advisor here in the US. All students have a homeroom teacher that acts both as their main teacher and an advisor, and then different teachers will come in for different subjects. But the students never leave their classrooms. They're always in that same classroom unless they go to, say, like a media class where they have to actually go to a different room that has that facilities that they could use for that course. And then middle school is the appearance of exam hell. Exam hell is you got practice for the exams, you'll have practice exams. If you don't do well in those, it's just really bad. And there's a lot of pressure to do exceptionally well in exams, which happen about twice a year. So the uniforms, again the sailor fuku, and then again the black male uniform. You see those there. There is a difference with the male's uniforms stay the same all year round, but female uniforms, they'll have a difference between hot weather and cold weather. And then in terms of legs, it gets kind of tough. You could wear maybe leggings. You might be able to wear your school designated gym pants under them, but that's about it. You don't see tights that often, and you definitely don't have uniform pants for women. And behavior and reputation, this is highly associated, and they teach them a lot about this in middle school when they're first starting out, because when you're wearing that uniform, the uniforms are really, you can identify them to a certain school. They belong to a certain school. So I always like Yu Yu Hakusho because they were always harping on this, how if somebody wore a different uniform or it wasn't the one school designated for students, or if you did something and you could be identified with that uniform, you were making a bad impression for the school and that you represented the school. And this is constantly talked about with the students. It comes from moral education. Moral education is started in elementary school, and at first it's about being a good citizen and doing what you're told and being independent. And when you get up to middle school, then the pressure is bigger. It's about being an upstanding and absolutely successful citizen, doing the best you can, being sort of, again, that representative for that school. So they sort of crack down on the students in middle school. But you do start to see bento in middle school. Bento are the homemade lunches. And so you'll see a lot of the cute ones. You'll sometimes see just really standard ones. And then we get up to high school students. High school students are about 30 to 40 students in a class. So we see this sort of regular, about 30 students per class as we go through the different grade levels. School's about 6 days a week. Saturdays have been half days, but a lot of schools are trying to get Saturdays to be a break as well. Currently, they still have sort of half days on Saturdays. That could be remedial lessons, that could be extra club responsibilities, it's just, or exam preparation. They just sort of want students to still be at the schools on Saturdays. So really, Sunday is their only day off. Everybody's totally off that day. Juku and cram school. So cram school is you go to school, you're done about 2:30, 3 o'clock. You might have some club activities, and then maybe you can get some dinner, maybe you can do some homework, and you'll have cram school, which is more school that evening. Some students do it 5 days a week, some students do it 1, maybe 3 days a week, and it's all in preparation for grades and test performance and getting into a college. And it's been pretty rigorous. It used to be just high school students, and then it was high school and middle school students because they had all the exams. But now there are JUCO or cram schools for elementary school students. Not necessarily to perform well in tests, but JUCO on like cutting shapes out of paper, or doing the activity correctly. So they're really trying to regulate how the students perform academically. And then, oh yeah, this was a big one for me that I didn't really realize until I got there because I never heard it. Asking questions is disrupting. It disrupts the class, and people will consider you a troublemaker. And that goes all the way up to college. People don't ask questions. If they have trouble in the material, you gotta figure it out on your own, or you have to ask a classmate, or maybe get someone to tutor you. Asking the teacher afterwards is sometimes okay, but really you never ask questions in the class. And so just remember that if you ever go to school over there, that there really isn't asking questions when the teacher is speaking. So
even during college, so they just have to blindly just believe what the teacher says?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's not like here. There's no debate nature, there's no discussion. You just are in there and you take the course.
So the class isn't interactive at all, it's just the teacher's one-way communicating with the students?
Exactly.
He doesn't call them for anything?
Exactly. No, they don't call on for certain answers. The only time I've seen that is if they're reading in class. So like they're going through and reading, or if you need to answer a problem on the board for like say math or something. But it won't be, say, some of our discussion nature courses here where we'll say, what is your opinion on this? What do you think about that? And then try to facilitate discussions with your peers and the teacher. They really don't have that. There is no nature that's like that for discussion. I think they're trying to change some things because, of course, as all countries are, they're looking at sort of the top testing countries and saying, what do they do? How do they teach the class? But that's really difficult for countries like Japan because it's a very different nature. It's heavily based on performance and testing. So they have a lot of trouble adapting to that unless they're sort of a private, more freewheeling school, so to speak. But uniforms, again, here we have the uniforms of the high school students. Oftentimes, students will have a blazer, so it looks a little bit more businesslike. And you'll see the difference between the seasons. Most of them all look this way, but the difference with high school uniforms is they're really popular. Not just in terms of function for the school, but also people just really like to wear them, even if they're not in school. So that's where you see nanchate seifuku, which are fake uniforms essentially, and there are whole shops dedicated. So even if you're like 30 or something, if you look young and you just want to, go out into town with a uniform on, you can just go buy sort of a school uniform. It's not going to be associated with a school. So if a Japanese person looks at that uniform and says, I don't really recognize a school, it could be a nanchate seifuku, which is like a fake one. Otherwise, it's pretty easy to identify some of the uniforms with their schools, but a lot of people like them. They like to individualize them with like special bows or what. And it's a lot of fun for people. So, and then tuition for private school is expensive, but there are not scholarship students. Scholarship is not a thing until you get to higher education, which is like college and university. If you can't afford the tuition for your school, then you don't go. That's sort of how they take it. And that's really, again, for private high schools or private middle schools, which there are more of than, say, the elementary schools, which have very few private schools. It's very prestigious to get into a private school in a middle school or high school. There are these things called elevator schools. Elevator schools are, say, where you enter a prestigious school, elementary or middle school, and then you don't have to test into these other schools for the rest of your educational career. You just rise up like an elevator essentially, and you go, or escalator, and you go up to whatever school that's associated with them, whether it's high school or college. So bento, and then we see the appearance of school stores. There are more school stores in high school. So you see the Japanese lunchtime rush. This is a thing. When I was in one of the high schools in Japan near where I lived, I thought they were kidding when they said, get out of the way when it's lunch hour, because students will try to get to the school store as fast as they can, so whatever they want doesn't run out. You will get bowled over. They're very polite, but you will get bowled over. And kind of like, excuse me, you know. It's a lot of fun, and they do have all the bread. It's like yakisoba bread, you know, a lot of different breads, sweets, drinks. School stores don't really have, say, meal types of food. So getting to school is always interesting. When you have the morning rush hour or the afternoon rush hour, you don't see as many students in the afternoon rush hour because there's so many different points at which they would leave school. They either go home early or they don't go home till after club, or some of them just stay out until cram school. So you mostly see students in the morning traveling together in mass to go to school on time. Bikes, trains, bus, or walk. The thing is cars aren't commonly used, even in the country, even in the rural areas. I have a friend who had a young son who started elementary school, and you know, they lived an hour away from his school. And I said, well, do you drive him? And she said, no, he walks. I said, could he take a bike, make it quicker? No, they're not allowed to. He just has to walk for an hour to school each way every day. So, I mean, that's just very standard. So bikes, trains, buses, or walk, just really no cars. When you see the cars in the anime of somebody fancy driving up, it's kind of fictitious. And so you'll see this a lot in the mornings, the elementary school students, middle school students, high school students riding on the trains together. So, and this is something that I always like to think about. I've never personally seen this, but running to school with toast in your mouth, it just doesn't really happen. I've never really seen it. You just eat at home, or if you don't have time, you just don't eat at all, and you eat extra at the school store, or hope that you have a big lunch that you brought with you. But certainly would be interesting to see. Class structure. The grades are divided into classes. So what you'll generally see is the first one is the class year. So you can be a second year, first year, third year. And then the second one is a class number. So that's where you're located. So I could be a first year, but I'm in class number 3 out of, say, maybe 8 classes. So you'll see things like this, music room number 3, or like on classrooms you'll see, you know, grade 6, so year 6, and then classroom identification, which also has to do with shoes and PE uniforms and whatnot. Usually a different class grade is marked with a different color. So you could have red, blue, and green, which are super common colors to have. Usually you only see yellow, blue, red, or green. So first years could be red, second years could be blue, and third years could be green, and their uniforms and indoor shoes will be colored as such. So when the last seniors graduate and they were green, everything circles around again, and the new class of first years will be green as everybody moves up. So you keep the same color the entire time you're in school. So class colors. So you can see first years and second years and whatnot. And that brings up uebaki. Uebaki are the indoor shoes. So I'm sure a lot of you know that you take off your shoes when you go inside, right? You usually put on slippers or socks or something. Uebaki for school, you know, when you're going to school, some kids wear tennis shoes, some of them wear their uniform shoes, they almost always have socks on. But when you get to school, you have to put your outdoor shoes that you just walked to school in a little locker that's assigned to you, tiny little shoe locker, put them in and put your indoor shoes on. And these are your indoor shoes, and you can only wear these inside. You shouldn't be wearing them outside because that brings dirt back in. So you can sort of see, these are always represented in a lot of media. So now you'll know what they are. And then you'll see sort of shoe lockers here as well. Some have doors, some don't. So you can see, which is a good shot of the shoe lockers. So when you take off your shoes and it's time to go to class and you've got your indoor shoes on, you get to the class and there's some things that actually happen when you get to the class first thing in the morning. So your homeroom teacher will walk in, you know, the bell sounds, it's going to start the day. So we're going to try this out. You have a class representative who stands up and they say, "Kids." So I'm going to ask you all to kiddies, which means stand up. Yay!
I'm a delinquent.
And then,
We want to fight, teacher?
you're a disgrace to the school.
Now eat this.
The good students will then ray, which means, sorry, I'm losing my voice, bow. So you bow to the home teacher. So you're like, yeah, you just bow. And then the class representative will say chakuseki, which means sit back down. So that's how every morning goes. You stand up, you bow to your homeroom teacher, and then you sit back down, and then they start with announcements and special events and coursework for that day if they're their first teacher that day, because homeroom teachers can also teach subjects. Oops. There we go. And cleaning. So you've had your first set of morning lessons and whatnot. So after your classes, and usually after lunch, it's time to clean the school. So cleaning the school, you know, we have janitors. Okay, so most Japanese schools don't have janitors. They might have somebody who comes to do like incinerating the trash, like burning the trash, or maybe clean up a couple of things, but not cleaning the whole school. So it's students' responsibility. So usually you have different people in the class who have different responsibilities, or you have a whole class with a certain responsibility. That could be taking out the trash, that can be cleaning the bathrooms, cleaning the hall, wiping down the windows, sweeping the dust away from outside around the doors that lead outside. So lots of different things students are responsible for, which you also see in media.
Oh, yeah.
And then some just mess around. And then that brings up another subject. Some of these students are wearing what look like PE uniforms. So, not quite. The bloomers actually were around in the early 90s, but only as a part of the uniform and competition, maybe for like field day and sports day and whatnot. They always wear pants and track suits and t-shirts, basically. No bloomers. So you'll see again the pants, shorts are really common, but not really short shorts. They go down to your knees really easily. So clubs are super popular. Clubs are abundant at these schools, from elementary school to middle school to high school. I'd say there definitely are more competitive clubs in middle school and high school. When you're in elementary school, you might have the radio club, the unicycle club, even though unicycle is used in PE as well. Super popular in elementary school. Many Japanese students will know how to ride a unicycle because it's in PE, it's out there for, they don't really have a recess, but on breaks they can go have what we would think of as a recess. So lots of fun, kind of lighthearted things, but when you get to middle school and high school, sure you have the, I guess, fine arts stuff like radio club, art, music, but you also have sports teams as well.
And let me guess, joining a club is practically mandatory.
It really is. Some schools it is mandatory. Some schools have the option, but if you belong to the going home club, which is really a thing, if you just go home and you don't join anything, students will be seen as apathetic or like they don't have any goals, something like that. So they encourage it heavily. So of course there's baseball, one of the biggest clubs there is out of all the sports. This is America's football basically. Baseball is huge in Japan, and high school baseball is even bigger than pro baseball in Japan. It's huge. It's like teenage gladiators. It's a really big deal. But it's also really exciting. If you go to Koshien in Osaka, which is the big sort of final area of the finals for student high school baseball, it's really intense and everybody's really into it. Of course, things like judo, a music club, and of course things like we see like this without the superpowers, or baseball. There are cycling clubs. It has become more popular with more exposure to Tour de France. There is volleyball. Japan actually has really high-level competing volleyball teams professionally, so that's become a big thing. Swimming, of course, is really popular. I actually have a number of friends who are on swim teams in Japan, and even at high school, they will go out of the country to compete.
Wow.
A lot of people go to Guam. Some of them go to Taiwan as well for swimming competitions. No host clubs. I'm sure someone will think of it someday. I don't know if the school will approve of it, but that's another thing to mention. You'll see sometimes tropes in media where students have to have so many members of their club. They have to have like at least 5 members. They have to have an advisor. They have to have the school's approval, and that's how they get student funding for it. And that's all true. All of that is very accurate. The number can vary, obviously. Maybe you can have 3 students, maybe you get a 5, maybe you have to have 10, although I don't think I've ever seen that much for a requirement. But you have to have a sanctioned school club. So it is quite difficult to start one unless it's very popular and it just wasn't at the school before. But I think most schools have pretty much everything that's very common to have. Back to Juku. There are actually some different kinds, normal versus elite. Juku came around because at first there were students who failed, so it was a solution for remedial lessons. If you didn't do well in school and your teacher, which is very different from America, is not supposed to spend their time outside of the classroom tutoring the students, you either need to get your own tutor or you need to go to cram school. So that's where that came from at first. And especially for preparation for entrance exams, which have always been sort of a big deal, but even more so recently in the last 30 years probably, they've become exceptionally big. The difference, what I'm talking about between normal and elite, normal is for things like you need extra lessons or you just need some exam review, and then there are the elite cram schools, both which you have to pay tuition to attend. So not only do you have to pay tuition for your normal school, you have to pay tuition for cram school. Elite cram schools are, you may already be a good student, you may already be in a good school, but your good school expects you to go to an elite cram school to, basically they expect you to be in a book 24/7, so that you can make the best possible exam score and get into the best possible school and make that high school look good. That's essentially what they're doing. Obviously, I'm sure they care about their students and their future, but there is really a heavy emphasis on making the school look good and representing your school well. And it is really late. I mean, most students, I've seen them, they typically run 9 to 11, but some of them are earlier, like 7 o'clock or so. So by the time you get out of school, let's say if you have school and then a club, you'll get out around 5, 6, go home, get some food, do some homework, and then off to cram school, and then you'll come home late at night and you'll do some more homework, and then you'll go to sleep. And you'll get up really early and do it all again. So it's a lot of studying. It's super rigorous. And so now the 1 out of 5 elementary schools attend cram schools. That was a figure from about 2 years ago, and it has been increasing. So it could be more by now, but I think it's stayed pretty steady. But that's a lot. Now elementary schools more go now. So you can see some here. Essentially, from what I understand from students, sometimes the cram schools cover the same material they've already covered in class, so some students get bored. Some students are just there, and sometimes they cover different materials, but Japan has what's called a centralized education system. It means the federal government regulates most of what they do, and so it's very consistent from all schools, no matter what prefecture you're in. So students are generally learning the same thing that all their peers are as well at that same level. So there's not much variation where like we'll have classes of different levels, not necessarily grade level, but you could have one grade level and you could